America's cultural diversity has always been a strength of our nation. The growing proportion of Hispanics in the U.S. population constitutes one of the most dramatic demographic shifts in our history. As we celebrate National Hispanic Heritage Month, we'll speak with two university professors about the cultural characteristics and values that help define the Hispanic community. Next on Metro Center Outlook. Hello, I'm Diane Trees. Hispanic Americans have long played a role in shaping America. Understanding the cultural values of Latino Americans provides insights into their communities and, in turn, American culture as a whole. Dr. Carlos Zalliquet is a professor in the Department of Educational Psychology, Counseling, and Special Education at Pennsylvania State University. Dr. Zalliquet, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You've said that to understand Latino Americans, it's necessary to understand cultural characteristics and values. Why is that so important?
Every time we attempt to understand other person's behavior, we understand that that behavior comes from a context, and the context is usually provided by the person's values. In one way, we are all equal, and I understand that. But in another way, we are all like some other people, like the people that represent our heritage, our roots. And that gives us a worldview, a way to look at the world. So knowing your worldview will help me communicate better with you. Knowing Latino values will help you deal with Latinos and communicate in a more effective way.
I know this is a very general question, but what do you think makes this population so distinctive?
I think that there are two elements. One is the diversity within the Latinos, because we come in all forms and shapes, but also the commonality of language, values like religiosity, familismo, or the family, the idea of respecting our elders, the idea of commitment and loyalty. Those elements make us somewhat unique in that sense, because we are more collectivistic in the present type of group.
It sounds as if it's a very much a relationship building kind of culture, with each other as well as with others.
With each other and with others, you are so right on that one. And the pervasive element behind that is trust. So many people would like to get to the point. Well, if you are working with a Latino person, you would like to get to the person to get your point.
That's very interesting. You talked a little bit about the diversity. With a term like Hispanic, I think that obscures the enormous diversity that exists within the population. What are some of the distinctions?
For example, we have distinctions in terms of from where we come from. Hispanics, some of them come from Spain. So they are European adapted to the Americas. Some come from native, mestizo, or indigenous populations. Some come from the mix of these races. So we have, for example, we think about Cubans, to talk about a case that is closer to Florida. Cubans are, for the most part, from Hispanic descent, but there's also Cuban Chinese and Cuban or Afro-Cuban.
Well, I was reading that there's more than 24 countries that consider people coming from to be Hispanic descent. 24 countries is a lot. Let's talk a little bit more about some of these values. Fatalismo is a term of philosophy, actually, where a person believes that they can do little to alter their fate. How much is this entrenched in the Latino culture, and does that differ from U.S. American culture?
Actually, it does. In the U.S. perspective, mainstream perspective, is you tackle what is given to you or what you are facing, and your idea is to conquer and overcome. In our case, when we look about the Latino perspective, fatalism or fatalismo represent a worldview that says some things will happen no matter what, and there isn't much we can do. So that gives you a sense to accept some of the biggest challenges. So people see fatalismo as a bad thing. It could be, But among the studies done, what we do know is that fatalism will, in some cases, restrain you from attempt solving issues, but also will give you a capacity to accept something that cannot be really solved, like, for example, the loss of a beloved person. And so it does have an upside and a downside. More importantly, it comes from our religious and our sort of higher order belief, if you want to put it that way. And that means there is a higher power that runs life, not just us. But at the same time, paradoxically, we do have an optimistic view of life. So what that means is, on one hand, we accept that there are things that will happen no matter what, and there isn't much we can do. But on the other hand, we believe that life is good and we can overcome. And the balance of those things sometimes give us a chance to accept and still move forward, as opposed to believe that we will not do anything about it. So there is two ways to see fatalism.
I was thinking when I first heard the term that might present a problem in like a healthcare field, because the communication would not be the same. The other thing you said, that the relationship comes first, and I think that as from my background, I'm much more direct. So we're talking about a lot of different elements that make cultures different, and probably challenges with communication.
You are so right on that.
And with your kind of work, do you counsel people on because probably a lot of misconceptions come around because of the different way we think?
We do it both ways when it comes down to counseling and therapy. On one hand, we help people cope with a different culture, especially newcomers, immigrants, but also Latinos born in the United States have to balance and cope with these two motherlands, the one from their parents and the one that they were born in. And so bringing those two together and still valuing both roots is a central piece for working in counseling. But the other one is also helping Latinos how to navigate, the mainstream culture. One of the best things I do sometimes is to help them understand, how do you go, for example, for a job interview? Why? They will come and expect that you will value what they do. If you are an American interviewer, you want your interviewee to tell you, why is it that they should be a good value and a hire for this particular company?
So it's just reversed around. It seems that many Latinos maintain that strong sense of ethnic identity, no matter how long they're in the United States or even with successive generations. Is that true, and why is that?
It is true. We value our ancestry. And for a while, we were going in sort of all directions. Now we are coming back. And the reason I say that is because I interview, for example, migrant farm worker children. And I ask them, so what are you? Are you a Latino? Okay, or you are a mainstream American? And more often than not today, they will say, I'm both. I honor my roots and I honor my country, the US, and my goal is to bring them together. That change is bringing a renaissance in the sense of identity for Latinos and the value of your identity, as opposed to the past where people were more than not trying to hide it because of fears of being discriminated or biased against.
Right. Tell me more about the family, the significance of family for the Latino culture.
Family is central, and actually many of us sacrifice decisions for the sake of the family. We don't want to be away, we want to stay closer. Now, having said that, because of the value of family, sometimes immigrants will come to the United States seeking a better future. But the goal is also to help their families in the motherland from where they come from. So it's interesting how even when you see them drifting away from the family comes with you, within you.
Okay, so you're talking about closeness, not only just with being, a loved one and keeping those relationships. You're talking about proximity, that the group as a family, the group stays together.
For the most part. In fact, it's funny because I used to teach in Texas, and I was in a university 60 miles north of Houston. And we have a very big influx of Latino students. And the reason for that is because they could be far away from their families, but close enough to drive back in an hour to visit with them.
Do you find that this geographical proximity that's due to that commitment to family, does that hinder the pathway for promotional success for Latinos? We have such a global society.
Actually, that is an interesting point, because we will have to make amendments on that one. The reason is very clear. The world is becoming global, so the idea of staying in a single place is not more effective as of today. However, with advances in technology, we keep connected. To give you an example, I Skype my mother every Sunday at lunchtime, and even though we are not at the same table, we are having lunch together.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Dr. Zaloucette, I think that America has been described for a very long time as a melting pot of people, but with the Latino population, it does seem that it's a more integration process rather than an assimilation process. How do you see the American-U.S. culture changing in the next few years as a result of this?
That's a very important question. In fact, the idea of the melting pot is now being left behind. And the reason for that is because in a melting pot, all the ingredients becomes one. And so there is no uniqueness and there is no identification, whereas the concept of the tossed salad becomes much more comprehensive, where each one of the elements contribute to the whole, but also can be identified. If you look at that in terms of race and ethnicity, what we will see is major valuing of the contributions of each group, and also the combination of those elements to bring America to the next stage of development in terms of business, education, health, and globalization. And I think all these different connections that brings cultures into the plate will make us better.
Like you said, that's much better with the distinctions in, but still be part of one whole. Very good. Thank you so much. It was very interesting.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
When we return, we'll speak with a UCF professor whose fictional short stories have been recognized as must-read books to help understand Cuba and Cuban Americans. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Our next guest, Dr. Cecilia Rodriguez Milanes, is an associate professor in the Department of English at UCF. She's a teacher and a published poet, and her research interests include Latino and Latina literature. Dr. Rodriguez Milanes, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
What prompted you to write stories about Cuban Americans and Cuban exiles?
I am one of the group, and I have a family that is made up of Cuban exiles and Cuban Americans. And I lived in Miami from 1974 until about 1987. And then I moved back again in 1990 and was there for another year and a half. So I've always been interested in Miami, and my family watched a lot of news. And I was always a little disturbed about the way that Cubans were represented in TV coverage. Mm-hmm. It was always the negative, always the gangsters and the people that were showing up dead in the gutters. And I said, there's more to the story.
Your stories are fictional.
Yes.
Do you have an audience in mind for when you write?
When I wrote the first book, I think I was writing just to tell the stories that were not being told. So I wrote in my book that in the afterword that I wrote for my people, but I was just called out on that. And they were like, you didn't write just for your people, you write for everyone, because you want everyone to read your work.
I thought that when I was reading them because it gave great insights for anybody to read them. You talk about the Marielitos, the Cuban exiles who came to the United States during the 1980 boat lift. What compelled you or fascinated you so much to write stories?
That was a really incredible historical phenomenon. When the bus crashed through the gates in the Peruvian embassy in Havana. And suddenly people started pouring in, and Fidel said, sure, anybody who wants to go, they can go. And suddenly, within hours, the place was packed. And my aunt and her husband actually climbed the fence and went onto the grounds. And so we didn't know this. We only found out when we got a call from them, I think it was like Easter, saying that they had just arrived in Key West on one of the first few boats that had come in the Mariel boat lift. And prior to that, we actually were going to the different places, because the Cuban radio stations would say, if you have lists of names of people you want us to go pick up, we have all these boats. People are going to go. They're going to go and they're going to sit in the Mariel harbor, and we're going to bring your family members. So bring us your names. So we went to these places and we'd take a list of names to see if we could get relatives to come. And so we didn't know who was going to be able to come. And so we watched the news with great interest to see who was coming. And then there's just so much, it's so poignant to see the faces of these people arriving. And then the reunions are just incredible.
What prompted you to write fictional stories about Cuban Americans and Cuban exiles?
I'm Cuban American. My parents are both Cuban. I married a Cuban, so I have Cuban on all sides. And I also lived in Miami from 1974 until 1987. So I lived there during the Mariel boat lift. And in fact, was very interested in it because I have an aunt, my mother's sister and her husband came in the boat lift. And they were actually on the Peruvian embassy grounds when the people started pouring in after the bus crashed through the gates. And so they were on the grounds, and we weren't sure if they were going to be able to come, and we would listen to the different news stations, the Cuban radio stations, saying, come and bring us your lists of family members, and we'll try to bring your family members, because people were taking every boat they could find in South Florida to go to the Mariel harbor to try to pick up relatives when Fidel said, sure, come and get them. But of course, he wasn't just letting go the people that were in the embassy. He was also letting go people that he didn't want to take care of anymore.
Well, you're referring to a time in the 1980s. Your stories are heartbreaking. With the way these people were treated when they came in the United States by the general population and even by Cuban Americans, why were they treated so harshly?
I think that because the first wave of immigrants had worked so hard, these exiles who had left so much behind and worked really hard and built up Miami, because Miami was very small. It was a sort of, one-horse town. And these folks were mostly middle class. They had educations, they had professions, and many of them who were doctors started out as janitors until they could get their licenses, or they became pharmacists, or became assistants, physician's assistants, because they couldn't get licensed.
Looking at the Cuban American culture with your background, how do you view the culture? Is it a hybrid of the two, or is it more of a blending and assimilation into America?
I think that it's a sort of an adapting and a acculturation. You take some things from your home heritage culture, and then you take something from the new culture, and it's a combination. I think that the other thing is that because Cuba has been mostly off limits, there hasn't been a lot of transnationalism where you see in other immigrant groups. So for those early waves, they couldn't really go back and forth too often. And so in a way, I think they held on even harder to their culture. They were more Spanish dominant in the home. The households were Cuban households. Now in the last, I would say 10 and 15 years, there has been way more travel from the more recent exiles that have left Cuba. So I have cousins that left 10 years ago, and they've already been back 3, 4, 5 times.
Why do you think Cuba has such a lasting influence on Cuban Americans?
I think it was part of the embargo, the fact that we couldn't communicate very easily. Letters were really hard to get through. If they did, they were redacted. Telephone conversations were, bugged, and you couldn't get through many times. So it was just always hard to reach, very, very hard to reach, not just physically, but even just in communication.
You, with your background, you tell stories very well. Is this part of your heritage? Is it part of your Cuban heritage? Are stories passed down or told in your families?
I think that's a very immigrant thing. I think that all communities of color have this oral history tradition, and we lived in a community with many ethnic Americans, and so they all told stories, and I was always interested in them.
You describe yourself as a feminist. How does that fit with the gender role of a typical Latino, and I shouldn't generalize, but the Latino family structure? How does that fit in?
Well, my mother was she is a very strong woman, and so I don't know if she would call herself a feminist, but certainly anybody would see her and talk with her would say, oh yeah, that lady's a feminist. And she was one of the very few women in the community that went to college. As a grown woman with children, she went to school at night. And so she had a job, a full-time job, and then my father took care of us. They swapped. So, you know, when my mother was at work, my father worked nights. So they for many years, they, you know, handed us off.
What a partnership.
Yeah, it really was. And so she was a role model for a lot of young women in the community. They said, look at this woman, you know, she's going to college and she's a Latina and she has a job too. And, you know, her husband actually helps. So I had that example. My father cooked and he cleaned and he combed our hair. So
a wonderful man.
Right. So I didn't really know the difference until I started to go into other people's homes. And that's when you realize, oh, not everybody lives like this.
Now you write in both English and Spanish. It's Spanglish. How did that evolve?
Yeah, I don't really write in Spanish, but some of my characters speak Spanish.
You have the words interchangeably in it. Yes.
Right. I try to put it in that it is, you can decipher it, it's like in context. So if you don't understand the word itself, you can figure it out.
Right.
So it's not really, I don't think that it's off-putting, but I think that because the United States is the 5th largest Spanish-speaking country in the world, Spanish is not a foreign language. Certainly it's not a foreign language to 20 million people in the United States. So that's why I use it freely.
How effective as a tool has it been in your writing?
I think that because some of the characters are more Cuban, closer to the moment of exile, it's important to sort of see the world through their eyes, and the language teaches you so much, the way that they think, the jokes, the sayings. Sometimes I have to ask my husband, I'll say, so what does this saying mean? Or I'll ask my dad or my mom, it depends.
I think the nuances, like you said, are much easier to take in when you write like that. Your stories are very emotionally touching. What do you want most for people to take away when they read your books?
Well, I appreciate that. I'm trying to tell stories about people that I imagine, but they seem very real to me.
They are real.
They might be like a composite of people. Or I read a story in the newspaper and I wanted to make that life a little fuller because it was too flat in the news story, right? So I would like people to think about, to sort of think beyond stereotypes, to see these as fully multidimensional people, and to not, first impressions, to maybe dig a little deeper.
Thank you so much for sharing your background with us.
Thank you.
Our show today celebrates Hispanic Heritage Month. Thanks for joining us on Metro Center Outlook. Until next time, I'm Diane Trees.